This is the Deseret News, Sunday edition, when your family needs to know more.
And good morning. Welcome to the Deseret News Sunday edition. I'm Dave McCann. Our focus today, faith and religious freedom. On Monday, the Christian-owned arts and crafts company Hobby Lobby asked the U.S. Supreme Court to take up their case. They believe the Affordable Care Act's mandate to cover birth control under employee health care plans violates their rights to practice their religious beliefs. We're going to discuss the case more in depth in a moment. First, listen to what the owners of Hobby Lobby have to say about the way they run their business.
It is our desire as the owners of this company to do everything we possibly can in terms of helping strengthen the families. Of course, closing on Sundays, real important to us. Giving our managers a 5-day work week is very important to us. Closing at 8 o'clock instead of 9 o'clock, so maybe a parent can tuck their kids in bed before they go to bed at night.
Probably the word I would use for that is integrity. And how do you live an integrated life? Your spirit, your mind, and body, all parts of your life together. And even the integrity of work and family. How do you balance not working too much and family and all those things? And so those help make us decisions, like when we close on a Sunday or close at 8. It's integrating life. It's more than just work. It's more than family. How do you do all of that in balance?
We just felt like whatever we did, we wanted to do it for the best. But it's just a part of our life that is, we can't separate it from our work and our family life.
And as we have ran our business, we feel the obligation or the desire that we want to use those same principles within our business.
My convictions enter into how we run our business. In every area that we feel like that would be something contrary to God's Word, that becomes a conviction for us. And just caring about our people is a conviction.
The Green family says they believe life begins at conception, and that's why they strongly oppose the morning after and the week after pill, because it aborts a fertilized egg. They have no objection to preventative birth control and will continue to cover this in their comprehensive insurance plan. George Will is a Fox News contributor and writer for the Washington Post. I asked him this week if he thinks the Supreme Court will take the case.
I think they'll take it, and I think it's enormously important, because what the administration, with its resistance to conscience exemptions for people who do not want to provide in their private businesses contraception under Obamacare, the administration seems to be saying, okay, you have the free exercise of religion in your temples, in your churches, in your synagogues, but nowhere else.
The Beckett Fund for Religious Liberty is handling the Hobby Lobby case, and joining me from Washington, D.C. is Executive Director Christina Arriaga. Thank you for being with us this morning.
My pleasure.
Let's start with your reaction to what George Will had to say.
Well, George Will is exactly right. This is a crucial issue for every single American that cares about living their personal and their deeply held convictions, not only at church and at home, but also in the way that they do business. For the last 200 years, since the United States was founded, we have understood that it is important to, as an entrepreneur, to have our values reflected in the type of work that we do and how we do it.
There are a lot of people watching this. How confident are you that the High Court will take this case on?
Well, a lot of experts are saying that indeed the Supreme Court will take this case. There is something very interesting, and that is that our client, Hobby Lobby, agreed with the government that this, even though Hobby Lobby won in the 10th Circuit, they agreed with the government that the Supreme Court should hear this case. And the reason is that different court systems have ruled differently on the rights of entrepreneurs to exercise their religious faith. And the Greens think that religious liberty is too important to leave to split courts, that the Supreme Court should rule once and for all whether the Green family, as entrepreneurs, have the rights to exercise their religious liberty.
If Hobby Lobby wins this, what ramifications would that have across the country?
If Hobby Lobby wins this, it will set the precedent that individuals can continue to live their lives and be entrepreneurs and reflect not only their faith, but their values in their business. I mean, we all know businesses that reflect their values in what they do. Kosher businesses prepare food a certain way. They reflect their religious values. The same with many institutions such as Whole Foods. They prepare food according to what they think it's important to nutrition in the United States. This is an important value for all entrepreneurs.
What about the government's position that if they grant this kind of freedom to businesses, that then they can kind of exercise their will on their employees?
The government's position is absurd, and it's extreme, and it's completely extraordinary. The fact that a person decides to start a business or become an entrepreneur does not mean that he leaves all of his constitutional rights behind. Constitutional rights still apply. They still have the right to exercise their deeply held convictions. Now, let's make it very clear. The Green family will continue to provide excellent health insurance coverage, and they will continue to provide preventive contraceptive care. They're only objecting to a very small sliver of what the government itself has admitted are drugs that cause the that deny implantation in the womb. In other words, when you believe, like the Green family does, that life begins at conception, these drugs cause abortions and the end of life. And the government has given hundreds of thousands of Americans exemptions, but they refuse to give exemption if the exemption requested, the protection requested, is because of religious faith.
All right, so walk us through what's going to happen. Let's say the High Court's going to take it. When do they let you know that they're taking on the case? And then when do arguments begin? And when do you think there'd actually be some resolution here?
We at the Becket Fund are hoping to hear before Thanksgiving whether the Supreme Court has decided to hear the case. The technical term is grant cert. And then if the Supreme Court decides that they're going to grant cert, the case will be heard before the end of the next term, which is June.
All right, we will be watching that. We'll have you back on as they announce what they're going to do and what the Becket Fund for Religious Liberty is planning to do with this Hobby Lobby case and the ramifications for a lot of other folks. Christina, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Christina Arriaga is the Executive Director of the Becket Fund for Religious Liberty in Washington, D.C. Reporter Matt Brown has covered the Hobby Lobby case extensively. You can find his articles on DeseretNews.com. Have you ever said this to your kids or grandkids? You're not old enough to have a smartphone. Coming up, the smartphone debate. Are they a need or just a want? This is the Deseret News Sunday edition here on KSL. Welcome back. Smartphones are on their way to becoming a need instead of just a want. That's because Americans are integrating the devices into every aspect of their lives. Earlier this year, the Pew Research Center reported that for the first time, a majority of adult Americans owned smartphones. That's compared to 35% 2 years ago. Only 9% of adult Americans don't own any kind of a cell phone. And it's easy to understand why an adult needs a smartphone. So what about the kids? Here to discuss is Deseret News financial writer Michael DeGroot. Smartphones and prices. You've brought a smartphone?
Well,
or is that not necessarily a smartphone? That's just a phone.
This is my 2008 Palm Centro. If anybody wants to trade this for an iPhone, give me a call, although it might not work.
So where we have you this morning is you are on the brink of moving to the smartphone.
I'm taking the plunge. This no longer will sync with my computer here at work, so I need to have something to sync my calendar or whatever. At least I think that I need it.
Yeah. Who convinced you of that?
That I needed it?
Yeah.
Myself. My wife might have a different idea, and that's part of the problem sometimes. What is it? When is a cell phone or a smartphone a need? When is it a want? My 12-year-old wants an iPhone, wants an iPhone, wants an iPhone.
Now, does she need an iPhone? Do our kids need these iPhones?
You know, that's an interesting question because, again, the argument can be made that they need it because this is going to be the future. This is how people are going to communicate in the future. And if you can prepare for it, you need to have one. On the other hand, do you really need to be connected all the time? She has an iPod. She has a laptop computer. She has computers at school.
Right.
Does she need to have it when she's like at the bus stop?
What happened to us? I think we were better off when people couldn't just reach us every second of the day. But now we feel like we have to be dialed in.
Well, there is this thing about being connected, and it is a change in society. We said 56% of Americans have adult Americans have a smartphone. Well, for people between the ages of 18 and 24, that's 78%. And that's regardless of how much money they make. I mean, it's a huge amount.
Now, we have a graphic that shows income levels and ownership. Even folks in lower income brackets own smartphones. We all have to have them. That's great for the phone makers and all of that. Not so good for a parent who's got to decide, does my kid need one or not?
Well, you have to ask yourself, look how adults use them even, as people become addicted to them. I was at an event the other day and at a talent show, and during the whole talent show, one of the adults was playing with their smartphone instead of watching a show, and people start using them. Now, if that affects adults, what's that going to do to a kid? And that's what people are afraid of, is that let's get their minds working without them first, perhaps, and then see what happens later as they integrate with this brave new world.
In your writings, as we all come to grips with, okay, I'm getting them smartphones, establishing rules seems to be the key. During the weeknight newscast, we do stories of situations where rules weren't established and disaster happens. You're reinforcing some rules.
Well, yes, you might have something like no cell phone during dinner, or put all your smartphones away during the Deseret News Sunday edition.
Right.
Or things like that.
Don't answer texts from strangers.
No, don't answer texts from strangers. But you can have, some people suggest even having a kind of a smartphone Sabbath. You take a day off and have no connected devices to kind of give that mind a chance to rest from it, and also to break possible addiction cycles from happening.
Where are we going with all this? 10 years from now, what are we going to be doing?
You look at Google Glass, and the idea is to turn us all into this integrated computer sort of thing. But think about that. How often, this is just 2008. If you got, I don't know if we're ever going to get implants or try to get implants in our brain, because, hey, I just got an implant. Oh, sorry, that's out of date. Now we have to have another operation to replace it. We'll
have you back to discuss the implants, Michael. Thank you very much. You can read much more from Michael DeGroot on this subject and many financial matters on DeseretNews.com, and you can find him on Twitter @DeGroot. Whether on their smartphone, at a computer, or in front of a television, kids are getting a lot of screen time, as we've been talking about. Most parents struggle to monitor it all. In today's Family Focus, Jennifer Stagg introduces us to a father whose unique skills allow him to be hyper diligent.
Digital devices used for entertainment and games. Homework assignments, even trumpet practice. The McCowan family is well connected.
Yeah, Disney Junior is a fun game.
But Dad's former occupation puts a twist on how technology is monitored in this home.
I guess if I did do something wrong, he could then find it.
That's because the head of this household used to be a government hacker.
I've seen what bad guys can do in the real world, and I make sure that I put in protections to protect my children from those things.
Each of our kids have their own login to the computer, and with each login we can limit their internet access, and they can't install certain things without our permission.
They also have a one strike you're out policy.
Then we're out of the internet in this house until we're 18.
Limitations on the
internet.
The
McCowans may have tight controls, but they also embrace technology.
I take kind of a liberal approach in that I want my children to use the internet, have those good experiences, be able to learn and access educational sites, even good entertainment sites, but then to be able to keep them safe in the process.
That means his 5-year-old twins know how to switch to airplane mode.
Airplane mode is a thing to not get you on the internet.
The media saturation kids face is just going to keep increasing, and that is going to require good parenting in both the real world and the virtual world.
This digital world is great, and it gives us so many benefits, but it's the real world that matters.
Jennifer Stagg reporting. It's one of the most anticipated movie releases of the year, but the man who wrote Ender's Game has come under fire. Up next, Orson Scott Card sits down with us to discuss the controversy and the movie when Deseret News Sunday Edition continues on KSL. Welcome back. Time for the Pulse. And this week we're talking about the president's religion, state slashing pay bumps for teachers, and a school canceling Halloween of all things. Allison Pond is national editor for the Deseret News and is here with our roundup. President Obama and religion. Why are we now just starting to learn a little bit more about this guy?
Well, this week the AP reported a story from one of President Obama's spiritual advisors, Joshua Dubois, who is no longer at the White House Office of Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships.
So he's now free to speak.
Exactly. So he's given us a little more insight into this. For the last 5 years, every day, Joshua has put together a devotional for the president that he reads every morning before his advisors arrive that incorporates scripture along with words from literary figures like Maya Angelou and C.S. Lewis. Joshua tells us that the president in private is actually a lot more religious in his Christian faith than he is in public.
Why so guarded with that kind of stuff for President Obama? Is he just afraid that people might see that he picked a side on one issue or the other?
That's a good question that a lot of people have talked about and hypothesized about. One theory is that, when he attends church in Washington, D.C., it's a big production, and he said that made him a little bit uncomfortable, and so he's backed off a little bit from that. During the election, he also had to back away from one of his former pastors that became politically
touchy. That's true. That was quite the deal. All right, teachers getting their salaries reduced, especially those with master's degrees. What's going on with that?
Yes, the Wall Street Journal first reported that several states have been reducing the amount that they used to give a little bit extra to people who had a master's degree.
Rewarding them a little bit for...
Exactly. Apparently the research shows that those who have a master's degree aren't necessarily better teachers and don't get better outcomes with kids, except in math and possibly science.
What kind of school, speaking of schools, cancels Halloween?
Well, one school in Pennsylvania did, and their reasoning is that Halloween has religious overtones in the origins of the holiday.
I thought it just had candy overtones.
And that's what a lot of the parents were saying, that nowadays you don't see those same religious elements, and that this isn't really a First Amendment issue, that there's probably something else going on.
Is this the start of something that's going to make its way to Utah and all the other schools where they go, all right, we're giving it up, no more Halloween parties?
I don't know. I hope not.
So do I.
A lot of what the parents are saying is, why rob the children of the same kind of experiences that we had when we were kids?
Exactly, because the parents, get half the candy when the kids come home. All right, just a few seconds now. What's coming up this week?
We have a story coming from reporter Lois Collins about families who are grieving and the different paths that different people take and what to say, what not to say to someone in those situations. And we also have a story coming up about car ownership. This is from Michael DeGroot, and about how the millennial generation may be symbolizing the end of America's love affair with owning and driving cars.
We do love to own our cars, especially Californians. Be interesting reads. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
For the Pulse, Allison Pond. You can find out more about these topics and read more of Allison's work online at DeseretNews.com. It's one of the most anticipated movie releases of the year, but Ender's Game is also facing a potential boycott. The movie's based on a book by Orson Scott Card, one of the most successful science fiction writers in America. But some controversial comments he's made about same-sex marriage in the past have Hollywood producers nervous. Here's KSL TV's Carol Makita.
Ender's Game explodes into movie theaters this fall. It boasts some big names: Harrison Ford, Ben Kingsley, Viola Davis. The much anticipated story of a band of young space warriors, played by Asa Butterfield, Haley Steinfeld, and Abigail Breslin, is already attracting a great deal of attention.
We were having a real problem getting Ender's Game to work as a script.
The original story came from the imagination of Orson Scott Card, but because of his outspoken views on same-sex marriage, some are threatening to boycott the film.
The only reason I'm being attacked for it is because Ender's Game is coming out as a movie. So that was something that was going to get a lot of publicity for the people attacking.
On his website now are past quotes and explanations, including from a 2008 column he wrote in the Deseret News. From a recent LA Times article which questions the possible boycott, Card is quoted from his 1990 article for Sunstone magazine. Laws against homosexual behavior should remain on the books, to be used when necessary to send a clear message that those who flagrantly violate society's regulation of sexual behavior cannot be permitted to remain as acceptable equal citizens within that society. He told me that his views are basically unchanged, but he says his words are at times taken out of context.
I've had no criticism. I've had savage, lying, deceptive personal attacks, but no actual criticism because they've never addressed any of my actual ideas. That's their privilege, but character assassination seems to be the only political method that is in use today. And I don't play that game. And you can't defend against it. All you can do is try to offer ideas, and for those who want to listen to ideas, great. For those who simply want to punish you for not falling in line with their dogmas, there's really not much you can do about it.
Are you concerned that it will affect your work?
No, it won't affect my work. Will it affect the reception of my work? Of course, but not in ways that they expect. My sales go up with such attacks.
Card's popularity goes beyond science fiction. He says from an early age, you couldn't tear him away from a book.
Well, falling in love with reading books was, that was just part of being alive in our house. If it was a book, I would read it.
But it was Ender's Game that put him on the map, first as a short story, then the novel.
I started science fiction for the money, for the practical aspect, but I have stayed with it because it's very liberating and very clarifying for a writer.
So why do you write?
Nobody will pay me to do anything else. That's not a joke.
He says he wrote 20 drafts of a screenplay for Ender's Game, but finally screenwriter Richard LaGravenese's wife, Anne, told him to look at it as a buddy movie.
She gave me a new way of thinking about my own story that made
Ultimately,
it so that
director
I could,
Gavin Hood wrote it, but at 62, Orson Scott Card is about to watch his first and biggest success come to life.
Here we go.
And it was well on the way to becoming a sharp, tight, fast, hard-hitting movie.
Producers are worried about negative publicity and say his personal views about gay marriage are not theirs. At a recent Comic-Con event, Harrison Ford replied simply, "I think we all know that we've won, that humanity has won, and that's the end of the story." So whether it is his next yet-to-be-written book or the controversy surrounding the film version of his first, the words of Orson Scott Card will speak to millions for some time to come. Carol Makita, KSL 5 News.
Kind of expect Darth Vader to pop up in that movie. Ender's Game opens in theaters in Utah and around the country on Friday. And that does it for this week's edition of Deseret News Sunday Edition. I'm Dave McCann. Hope you have a great day enjoying some of this fantastic fall weather. We'll see you back here next week. Music and the spoken word is coming up next.
In this war, if you succeed, you will be remembered as a hero. He's abandoning his entire fleet. He's in command. There's no stopping him now.
Unless we act now, Earth will be